I'm really excited about the next couple of days. Shaun Smit and I, earlier this year, ran an event actually at Shaun's church, which is called Legacy Believers Church in Burleigh and on the Gold Coast. We ran a seminar, a couple of days seminar similar to this, and it was just a great time. I felt a great synergy with Shaun and was so confident to bring him here to our tribe, and I know that over the next couple of days it's going to be really helpful, Shaun's presentation. So let me just introduce Shaun a little bit to you. So Shaun Smit is a Queenslander. We won't hold that against him. Senior leader of a great church on the Gold Coast or in Burleigh called Faith Legacy Church, great church there. But also, and excites me as well, Shaun is anointed as a bivocational minister. He's got a great church, but also operates Growth Coach as a trainer, as a mindset trainer. He's NLP practitioner. If you don't know what NLP is, neuro-linguistic programming, Shaun will give you the quick rundown in his session, I'm sure. Great passion Shaun has to see people's lives transformed and changed. A really powerful equipper and very smart. You're going to figure that out over the next couple of sessions as well. Can I just encourage you? Can I encourage you to take notes, really absorb what's going on here? The format, just so that you know, the format of how we do this, rather than it just being an unlimited preach fest over the next couple of days, is this. We actually want to put you to work. Is that all right? I know you came and oh man, 2 days on the coast. We actually want to put you to work. And so what we're going to do, the sessions are going to go for about 45 minutes, but really we're going to bring some version of a presentation, maybe anywhere from 25 to 35 minutes. And then we're going to invite the room to come into like a Q&A, a response. And I found over the last number of years that sometimes I get more out of the Q&A than I do the presentation. I really do. So, couple of things. We're recording these sessions. All of them will be recorded professionally and will be gifted to you as soon as we edit them. It takes about a couple of weeks, and then you will receive all the sessions recorded. What we don't record is when we get into the Q&A, we turn it off. So we don't capture the Q&A, because the idea of the Q&A is a couple of things. We want this to be a confidential, safe room for you, so that if you ask something that has great relevance to your business, it's not going to be broadcast on the World Wide Web. You're not supposed to say that anymore. I just said it's not going to be broadcast on the internet. So we'll capture the formal presentations. You'll get those. The Q&As we won't capture. But I really encourage you. Let's play together in this space. And if something like, if you want to push back on something, I'm going to speak for Shaun, or I'll speak for myself. I'm robust enough to have you go, hey, I don't understand that, or, that really pushes something here, and it's okay if we don't have resolution in the end. Is that all right? Because this whole thought is a learning experience, growing experience. We're going to present to you a whole bunch of stuff. So, Shaun, we want to welcome you, and you're going to launch us out, session 1. So please come. Thank you. Can we welcome Shaun as he comes? So, gents, just make sure you help us with the timers. Thanks.
Thank you, my friend.
Thanks, buddy.
Appreciate it. You're well? Yes. Okay, for the 4 of you, this is going to be a lot of work today. For the rest of you, are you doing okay? Yes. Are you sure? I just want to open up technology. I love technology. Who loves technology in the house? Please be with me for a few moments. But I want to just thank David for inviting me. I don't take it lightly. My wife says you're an A-type personality. Any A-type personalities? Hey, Dennis, how you doing? Any A-type? Yeah? Okay, so you understand when you're focused, and nothing else matters. My little 3-year-old at home, he's sick. Doctors gave him bad reports, whole lot of fear they tried to put on her last night. And I just said, look, we stand, we believe, God's in control. She phones me this morning and said, babes, don't be distracted. You're on assignment. Be the A-type personality you are and just lean in with everything you are, right? So I don't take it lightly being here. I want to honor David. He's been catalytic in our events on the Gold Coast. I really respect and honor him. And I think I'm going to grow and learn more than anybody here just being in this environment, because environment plays a big impact, okay? We're going to be talking about that. You move in the right environments, things shift for you. Okay, and we're gonna share a few things. I am bivocational, not confused, but bivocational. And the reason for that we'll share. I don't want to spend too much time talking about myself because I want to really lean into what we want to do this morning. But over the last decade, I've had the opportunity of sitting on multiple boards, advisory and formal, and been involved in 2 startups, 2 of them that reached 7 figures. So I've been in ministry for 20 years. But I've been an entrepreneur most of my life. And so I can't be put in a box. There's something that just grieves me, frustrates me, makes me feel like I'm going to choke the moment people say that's what you should look like. And my encouragement for you would be to tell them the same thing I tell them, is I'm holding my paintbrush and my canvas. Get your own brush and paint your own picture. Okay? And so I want to just be true to that. But I've gained a lot of insights and experience. Some of the stuff I'm talking about, I learned the hard way. How many been stuck? Right? How many been stuck in their journeys? And so I've discovered a few things and learned a few things and had some great mentors along the way and did additional study, which has helped me kind of position some of the things I want to be talking about this morning. So if that's good, one thing I do ask is that we do have a honesty policy. That, feel free to share things. And I know that David did mention, but I'm sure that there's a confidentiality in this room. That as we share things, what happens here stays here, right? Because we want to honor the people around us and give everybody space just to be vulnerable, honest, but also be able to learn and take the most away, okay? Because it's not just information that helps, it's the application and the attachment to things that are going to help us and position us to succeed. Are we all good with all that? Yeah. Now, I promised I won't preach, and I don't want to preach. But after that worship, I was like, man, I just felt like jumping into free flow. But I was like, you're on assignment. Stay on assignment, Shaun. But let me I want to just share one thing, is that, the Bible talks about that, beloved, I wish above all things you prosper, being in health, even as thy soul prospers. It frustrated me as a minister and as somebody that's been in the ministry for almost 20 years now, where you have the same prayer line and the same people come up. But yet they're doing all those right things. And I just went to the Lord. I said, Lord, I'm confused. I thought the word was all powerful. What's going on? And this scripture jumped down and slapped me, and he said, read it. And I read it. And he said, your soul is your mind, your will, and your emotions. So the level of quality of your mind, your will, and your emotions will determine the quality of your external prosperity. The level you experience life will be determined on what's happening on the inside of you. Not how educated you are, not how many certificates you have on the wall. Those things are great. I believe in education, I believe in study. But the thing is this, what's happening in you is more important than what's happening outside of you. You cannot stop what's happening outside of you, but you can control what's happening in you. And that took me down this journey to go, Lord, help me to understand it. Because if you have a washing machine, you go to the manufacturer's guide. Don't put dishes in the washing machine. Common sense, right? It's not designed for that. So when we aren't functioning in the way God intended us to function, we need to go back to understand how are we wired and get in alignment with that to reach peak performance. Because God said in Joshua, that you meditate on my word and you make your way successful. So I want to touch on a few things, particularly reaching into the emotional side of things today. So you just think about any pilots in the room, because every time I pick a topic, you'll have some guy going, I'm a pilot, and you said this thing, and that's not quite true. So I just want to make sure, I want to qualify. Are there any pilots in the house? No. Okay, great. I'm safe. Thank you, Lord. Okay. So how many know in a cockpit there's indicators that a pilot must know, and you know, when there's a warning indicator going on, a pilot's got to be equipped to know what that means, right? And how to respond to it. Two particular, one would be the altitude indicator. And so what this tells us is basically or it's known as the artificial horizon. So how it works is it basically tells if the plane is leveled, right? So, you know, when it's dark or cloudy, it helps the pilot to know, am I level? The other one is what you call a stall indicator. So if the uplift of the plane is too steep, it can stall. So it needs to make a correction. You're with me? And so you go, so what's that got to do with today? It's got everything to do with today, because our emotions are like those indicators. See, we train people, and the worst thing to do with kids is go, like, stop doing that. Allow them to express their emotions, but to discover, why are you like that? Why? What's troubling you? And so sometimes as adults, we suppress our emotions, and we don't deal with the things that are actually warnings that we've been wired that way to go, hey, there's a problem here, stop and pause, what's going on? So emotions are not a bad thing. They're a bad thing when we don't deal with them and we suppress them, okay? But when we actually discover and dig deep to go, okay, what's actually happening? What is going on inside of me right now? I get to, you know, level out or drop the rise and bring the plane back level. I get to do that to my life. You're with me? Okay, and I think that's really important this morning. So you know what? Unintended emotions will affect our growth, our personal development, our leadership, how we interact with people. You know, just out of curiosity, in this room, how many people are self-employed? Well, I mean, it's just you and you, right? Okay. How many people in here, you've got a couple employees? More than 5? More than 12? More than 40? More than 50? Okay, more than 40. God bless you. Anyway, that's we've got a prayer line afterwards, right? But how many know that if we don't know how to deal with our emotions, particularly in ourselves, you know, it starts with leading yourself. Okay, but also when we get into an environment where we got teams, now all of a sudden it's just not my emotions I got to manage. I got to start learning to know what's happening in the team around me. Why are they responding like that? Why are they reacting like that? So a lot of the stuff we learn, I think it was Daniel Coleman, is a psychologist, talks about there's four processes in how to manage your emotions. The first thing is managing your emotions, or creating awareness firstly, then managing them, then being aware of what's happening around you, and then managing the social environment. When you get to that place, it's called, you know, emotional intelligence, right? They say that most CEOs are hired because of IQ, but most are fired because they lack EQ. So you see somebody go, man, this resume is great, phenomenal. But when COVID happens and all the pressure's on, right, and things look like they're falling apart, they start falling apart because they can't manage their outside world, and their teams start crumbling because the leader's dropping the ball, all because of he can't manage what's happening inside. Right? So I think it's vital. So I want to spend some time and just unpack a few things here. Can we go to the next slide? How are these emotions actually formed within us? When we hear the word emotion, what are the things you think about? Happy. Feelings. Love. Anger. Hatred. Fear. Right? All these things start happening because that's what it is. There's good emotions and bad emotions. But how are these emotions actually forming in our lives? You see, when we understand this, that our brains are wired for two things: to identify threat or identify reward. That's what we're wired for. We're wired for two things. We're either looking for reward or we're looking for threat. There's no other way. But what happens is when these events or circumstances take place, the feeling region in the brain releases a chemical, right? And that chemical is released into our body. And it starts to interpret, is this a threat? And what happens? Chemicals are released, And what happens? Adrenaline and cortisol is released. If it's reward, what happens? Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, all these things. So all the happy things are released, right? And so, but it's got to do with our interpretation. How are we interpreting what's happening around us and knowing how to respond to it? So in other words, you can look at it like this. The feeling part of the brain hijacks the thinking part of the brain. Okay? You are somebody that's been in prison, and we've dealt with a lot of guys that have come out of prison and going through rehabilitation back into society. They didn't want to kill somebody. It was in the moment of anger, fight or flight, that what happened? The feeling part overrode the thinking part. And I couldn't catch up with myself. There was a reaction. I responded to it. My body responded to it. Only afterwards to sit in remorse going, I didn't want to do that. Why? Because I couldn't identify what's happening in me, the trigger that's happening in me. I wasn't equipped. I wasn't aware of what, and that's an extreme example, but it happens so much. Husband and wives. How many husband and wives are you as a couple? Okay, don't put up your hand to any examples I talk about. All the single ones, only you respond. Right? But how many you know in marriage? Don't put up your hands. Guys, just wink, I'll see it. Right? So they hijack us. Can you go to the next slide? Let's look at this body-mind connection for the moment. Your thinking, how many know every thought you produce releases chemicals? It releases a response from the body, okay? How many actually believe that every thought you have, everything you think about, affects your destiny and your future? You all agree with me? See, here's the thing. Every single person thinks, on average, the studies say, between 60 and 70,000 thoughts per day. Research suggests that 90% of those thoughts are the same as the day before. So here's the thing. Could I predict my future based on what I'm thinking right now? Because unless I make a shift today, tomorrow I'm going to be thinking pretty much the same thing, which means my life today or tomorrow is going to be the same as it is today. So unless I start making, listen, it doesn't matter. You may be and you've reached $1 million enterprise. If you don't start thinking like a $10 million enterprise, you're not going to go to that next dimension. If you're self-employed and you go, if I don't start thinking scalability and expansion, and I want to be in control of everything, that's all you're going to have, right? So there's certain things and viewpoints we need to start changing and shifting. But if that's true, and that's what science has proven, that means I can predict my future based on what I'm thinking today, right? And so, once again, Scripture just confirms everything, and science is backing up Scripture more than ever. Scientists are going, this is an amazing discovery. And I think God's sitting up there going, it's taking you guys a long time to figure this out. And all of heaven's applauding. So let's look at the emotional reinforcement of this for the moment. You've obviously heard of nerve cells that fire together, wire together. In other words, any association, when I have an event happen or a circumstance happen or a thought pattern happen, an emotion happen, whatever are happening at the same time all starts wiring together, right? And so whatever I'm thinking about and experiencing starts becoming my hardware, which starts driving the software, which is your subconscious, okay? In other words, you start living, I'll give you an example. You're talking about what NLP is. NLP is talking about neurons. Every thought you have, our brain releases neurons. Language, NLP, L stands for the language. We have a language, a dialogue inside, how we interpret things and what we're speaking. But the programming side means we can reprogram anything. That's what neuroplasticity is about. That I can reprogram anything. There's nothing, any habit, any situation, any thought process, any mindset can be reprogrammed if I have the right tools. And if I'm aware and intentional about it, I can reprogram anything. I can reprogram my life, which means I can reprogram my destiny. Yeah? So I'll give you an example. How many of you actually think about tying your shoelace? Okay. Was there a time ever that you had to think about tying your shoelace? So what was that? That was your short-term memory, okay, the will region, where you willfully trying to do this and figure it out. But eventually when you get it right, it drops into long-term memory. Now all of a sudden I don't have to think about it, I just do it out of habit. That's because it's dropped into my subconscious and it's just something automatic. It's a habit, it's a pattern. I can just do it, right? I don't have to think about brushing my teeth. Hopefully you don't have to think about getting dressed in the morning, right? And so that's what this is talking about. So when we look at it like this, think about it. Any event or experience that happens in our world, okay, our 5 senses are being activated. And so what happens in that is we start filtering information. Our brain starts taking in all the data that's coming in. And it starts interpreting this. And what happens is you have these networks and neurons being released and these networks being formed that starts to establish things. When this is established, chemicals are released, and that's called a feeling, and it becomes an emotion. Okay? Are you with me? Okay? So, the biggest thing is associations. When I'm thinking about things and associating it to something, the stronger that feeling is, the stronger the feeling of that experience is, the deeper rooted that emotion becomes, the stronger the emotion becomes. Are you all with me? So think about it like this. The moment you feel different inside and pay attention to what caused it on the outside, the brain takes a snapshot. That's called a memory. And the memory drops into long-term memory. So it's no longer something that you think about. It's something that's just there. So I don't have a whiteboard, but picture this for the moment. Picture a triangle. And on that triangle, you got 3 points. And on one point, you got childhood. The other point, you got experiences. And the other point, you got environment. That's basically your perception or framework of how you see the world. The way you experienced your childhood, the events that happened there start forming your world. Do you know that research says this? That 50% of the emotions, the thoughts that you have of your past are actually inaccurate. Because we don't remember with detail, we remember with emotion. Right? So think about it. You deal with a lot of people with childhood traumas. They don't know how to truly interpret the fact of what's happening, right? My parents divorced at 5. I grew up with lots of childhood trauma and issues and all these things that were holding me back. But I've painted this picture of what happened and how it is and what it was. Why? Because all I had is an emotion attached, a snapshot of that moment. But I don't have all the detail. So I made the detail up as I went and as I grew up. Can you see that's how it works? So often we have things happen to us and our brain takes a snapshot by the heightened memory or emotion of it and it drops into our subconscious. Now all of a sudden we carry this through our lives and all of a sudden I'll touch on triggers in a moment. Things happen, we get triggered based on something that's not actually fact. But we're getting triggered by things that we don't even know why we're being triggered. And then people say, they triggered me. Nobody can trigger you. Okay, and we'll touch on that in a moment. See some of the faces. You don't know the people I deal with. No, you don't know the people I deal with. So, can you go to the next slide? So, what is an emotional trigger? An emotional trigger is basically a stimulus that activates an emotion. So think about this. It could be a word. It could be a sound. It could be a song, a smell. Listen, if I smell coconut, I'm in the Caribbean, Western Caribbean, Haiti or Jamaica. Because that's where I first tasted coconuts. That's where I first tasted virgin pina colada. Okay? And that was honeymoon, by the way. So the emotions were high. The memory was great. Okay? I love anything coconut now. There's healthy emotions as well. But can you see what I'm saying? So anytime it triggers something. How many, this is not a sermon, but how many before you were saved were unsaved? Only one of you, great. I'll come talk to you. So, you don't have to answer, right? I see the danger, yeah? But, before we saved, we may not have been saved. We may not have acted like we saved. We may not have been sanctified. But how many know we did things we probably shouldn't have? We were in places we shouldn't have been. And so you listen to a song, and all of a sudden it's like, you go, what's happening? Yeah, there's something happening in me. There's something being released, and I'm remembering things I wasn't aware of. I wasn't thinking about it. I actually forgotten about it. How many of you have been in those situations? I couldn't remember that. But all of a sudden it's just come to your memory based on something that stimulated it. That's because it's still down there, hidden in the abyss, right? And so our unhealthy emotions and triggers are the exact same. That if we walk through life and we end up becoming stuck, and things trigger us, circumstances trigger us, they hold us back, and all of a sudden we don't know why. Somebody says something and you're angry. A situation happens and you feel hopeless, defeated. More than likely, almost 90% of the time, not even up to 95% of the time, it's got nothing to do with what's actually happening in front of you. It's actually got to do with something that you've interpreted. Remember, the thing is this, it's not so much what happens to you, it's the meaning you give to it. Right? And so when I haven't dealt with things in the past, really what I'm saying is I've put meaning around it that may not be accurate. And that meaning follows me through. So anytime somebody triggers me, right? And you deal with enough leaders and staff and people, you see it happen often. And you go, all I said was X, Y, Z. And now you want to leave the church. Or you want to quit your role. Like you're looking going, what was so big about that? But when you dig deep and you go under, you go, they actually have a rejection issue. They have something back here that they haven't quite dealt with. And now all I've done is triggered them. And they've put me in the same category. They've given the same meaning to what I've just said to what happened. And so a lot of our journey has to do with the meaning and interpretation we give them. And so if you come back to that triangle, you look at your childhood, you look at life's experiences. I've had more failures in life than successes, but my successes have outweighed the failures. But if I'd stayed in the failures, I wouldn't have been able to take risk on the next thing and chip away at the next thing till you find that breakthrough. Because if I gave meaning to my life in the present based on the past, I'm not going to be able to move into what I need to move into. You're with me? Okay? So your experiences start framing your world. But the other big thing is your environment. Your environment will either be catalytic to stimulate you into the right direction or stimulate you into the wrong direction. And I'll talk about it, I think I'm talking about it tomorrow maybe, I think it is, one of my sessions. But talk about 3 different types of environments. One's toxic, one's enriched, and one's standard. Okay, we'll be talking about that. But those 3 things frame you. So if you look at from a psychological point of view and from a neuroplasticity point of view, we operate in a bias. Every single person here has a bias, a perspective. So we all see the world differently. That's why there could be so much division in the church, in the body of Christ, because everybody's looking through a different filtration system, but yet they're looking at the same thing. Because everything has to do with their childhood, their experiences, and their environments. And now you wonder why you put a whole lot of people in a room together and you're trying to get to the same answer or the same agreement, and you can't, because there's too many different perceptions. There's too many biases, because it's been framed by the past. So when we understand those things, we position ourselves to actually work with people a lot better. Amen? You with me? I was talking about it earlier, and I thought about, my parents got divorced at 5. And so when I grew up, I was angry. I was, a party animal. I felt anger. I was docile like a Labrador. But there were moments when anger and frustration, and I can go into a rage where I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going, what's happening there? And you feel like your whole life, you try things, but you get to a place and they fail. It stops. Only to discover when you start looking back, there was a whole lot of things that I never dealt with as a child that were triggering me. Circumstances would come up. My dad was a business person. He was a reasonably successful man. But every time they were divorced, and every time I went to him with an idea, he said, it's not going to work. You can't do it. I don't have the money now. Because he was stuck in scarcity. Yet he had money, but he was in scarcity. So I knew he loved me, but what do you think happened to my journey? Every time I found something too difficult, what happened? Oh, maybe I should try something else. Maybe I should try something else. How many times do you think I tried something else? Lots and lots. Why? Purely because I hadn't dealt with roots of rejection. And so when circumstances come, there's a triggering that happens because I have the snapshot of the past that I never dealt with. But until I started to put new meaning on it and went, you know what? I started to reframe it and go, you know what? My dad didn't know any better. He only could respond to me based on what he knew. And I started to look through a different set of lenses to him. And so all of a sudden now, where I am, I'm breaking association to that, going, that has nothing to do with my success. He's my father. But he's got nothing to do with my success. So now I start severing this emotional tie, and I start breaking it, right? This emotional trigger. And I start reframing the way I look at him, the way I see him. And I go, he loved me. He did the best he could. He was a great dad. Now all of a sudden I start feeling freer, and all of a sudden I don't have as many restrictions because I'm not allowing that to hold me back anymore. I start breaking an association that's got absolutely nothing to do with my success. You're with me? And so I want to give you a few keys in the time we have. We've got 15 minutes left. And I want to get through some keys and we can have a few conversations around this. But the first one I want to give you, if you can go to the next slide, is disarming negative emotions. The first thing I call it is reaction awareness. How many know a trigger or an emotional, a negative emotion, I call it reaction. It's a reaction to something, okay? So I need to become aware of the reactions I'm having to circumstances and people. That's the number one rule in anything. When I become aware of my state, when I become aware of situations, of where people are at, I don't give it power anymore and it doesn't affect me. Because I choose what to do with it. I'm going, hold on, something's happening out in me based on what's happening on the outside of me, and I'm taking a check. What is it? Right? And so that's the first thing. The second thing is I adjust perspective. Okay? What meaning am I giving to this thing? What lens am I looking through? You know, this person responded like that. This situation's happening to me. Let me just step back and ask myself, what's happening? Dr. Caroline Leaf talks about this, and she talks about it in a way that when we start digging in and asking questions, we bring things from that subconscious level into the conscious. You know, and it's almost like exposing what's lying in darkness, bringing it to light. So by people go, yeah, but that can't be that significant. It is vitally significant. Because you're bringing it from an operating system that's lying almost dormant or undercurrent, you're bringing it to the surface. Now you can expose it and start dealing with it. So when I'm asking the right questions, things start happening in me, creativity starts happening in me, that I can start identifying things that I never thought were possible. I start asking the right questions, I start seeing new things. You with me? That's important. The third thing is disassociation. Out of the amount of people I've helped and worked with, and even in my own journeys, association and meaning. You give meaning to something, but when you associate things to certain things, okay, that needs to be broken. because sometimes we're associating things to the same things. You know, like I'll give you an example because I know it pretty well, is people get hurt. This will help drive the point home. People get hurt in one church and they move to another church. I know it never happened yet, or probably you've never experienced it. I've just seen it once or twice. And so they make this association, the church hurt me. So was it the church or one person? Or maybe was it really you that you haven't dealt with and you allowed it to affect you? Right? And so we make these associations, or, you know, pastors. I just rather go to a home church because pastors are just, you know, is it all pastors or just one? Or maybe he was having a bad day and you never gave him grace. You know, or I'm in my working environment and I walk in and the HR manager, you know, says something wrong and go, you know, our HR manager, they always. That's a generalized statement. Always or just today, when you were at your lowest. You with me? So I think that's very important. And the fourth thing is really anchoring a new perspective. Is how do I begin to take those things and begin to look at down the road? What do I want to see it at? How do I want to feel? How do I feel about this situation? Do I always want to feel hurt, broken, disgruntled? Do I always want to feel fear? Or do I want to see a new me? Do I want to live life differently? And start to anchor myself in that reality, not the things that have held me back. And I think if you begin to do those four things, and look, from a time point of view, I'm just dumping a foundation on you. But it's deep. And when we take time on these things, they might seem like simple steps, like, really? But I promise you, man, I've lived it. I've come out of a place of stuck to unstuck, to being more unstuck, more unstuck, more unstuck, more unstuck as we apply these things. Okay?